right, Chuck. I thought that was a great conversation. So much of what Ashley shared was not just super relevant to our discussion around quality, but super relevant to a lot of different conversations I find myself in these days. I'm sure you find yourself in too. What do you think was the most powerful, impactful comment she made?
Ooh, hard to pick one. I mean, I think Ashley's just such a strong thinker, and I appreciate her experience and kind of what she brings to bear on really two issues. So I guess there's sort of two sides of this, or not. I don't know if they're sides, but dual tracks, right? Because she's talking about the pluralism piece, and she has some real strong opinions about the quality of content and the
Hmm.
pursuit of knowledge. So those are two things that I mean, one takeaway is I don't think enough people in the education space talk about both at once. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's something that I really do appreciate. I think that people who are um, who are solely focused on one side of the house, on say the pluralism or the school choice side, often don't give really deep analysis and deep credit to the content side, and vice versa. And
Hmm.
I think so. I really do appreciate that she addresses both of those, and I think they're worth doing. There's some stuff, maybe I'll talk a little bit later about in specifically on the pluralism side that it kind of conjured up for me. But yeah, just like right off the top, I mean, what sort of a high level takeaway from that conversation for you?
Yeah, well, this idea of people sort of like they decide what their one issue or one pursuit is going to be, and then they sort of stick blinders up to some of those other ones. I agree
Hmm.
with that. I see that all the time. And I really commend her for sort of bringing them both into the conversation. This idea of educational pluralism, and then this, you know, knowledge building curriculum.
Yeah.
I was curious when she was talking about this knowledge building curriculum. Um, I find a lot of value in it. I see the importance of it. People, students need to know facts. They need to know content. They have to understand how things work, not just 2 plus 2 equals 4 like she discussed, but also from a historical standpoint, from a language standpoint. And I think it's really important that part of the curriculum is also this conversion of accountability for learning to the students. So it's like, the teacher role at some point, a student has to acquire the knowledge and the skill set to take on learning, to be their own um, instructor on how to get knowledge.
Hmm.
And so while I think what she talked about is really interesting because, yes, students need to be taught content, and yes, students need to be taught how to engage with their world to get their own content and to get their own information, um, which goes into a whole nother conversation about, you know, um, what information is accurate, what information is factual, being able to decipher that. But learning how to learn is a critical part of school these days. I do believe no matter where you come from, no matter what your background looks like, I believe that. And I also hold to be true the value of um, and the importance of content and the
Yeah.
knowledge of content.
Yeah, so I don't know that I disagree with you, but what that made me think of was what we teach in colleges of education.
Hmm.
And she's coming from the Johns Hopkins College of Education. She's got a sort of a clear affinity for history and
Right.
political science, but something that I know is really different about how we train teachers in the U.S. versus many other countries is that we don't train teachers to be content experts.
Hmm.
So,
Interesting.
and I think that's a big miss.
Yeah.
right? So and in fact, here's something that's um, I think a little bit bananas. So in the state of Alabama, if you are a tutor and you tutor, I forget what the number of hours is per week, but let's say you want to open up a business as like a part-time tutor. So I've got a friend who actually is in Alabama. He's a PhD mathematician. He does what's called pure mathematics. If you ask him, it's like so high a level of mathematics. If you say, "Hey, what do you do with that math?" He would say, "Nothing. I learned more math." Like he's just that. It's like math for math's sake. He loves math, right? Okay.
Mhm.
He can do practical things, but he's just at like a whole different level. In the state of Alabama, let's say that and he's a professor, but let's say that he wants to leave the academy and just wants to tutor. He can't do that because he doesn't have a teaching license in the state of Alabama.
Hmm.
So you've got a situation where in some states, somebody with a math PhD who teaches math to college students can't tutor um, a middle schooler in geometry because he doesn't have a teaching license. That to me is ridiculous. Like that's a
Right.
huge disconnect, and and I think it's a little bit related to how to what Ashley was saying about this sort of content versus like just skills and process.
Mhm.
Because if I think many of our colleges of education just overemphasize, well, here's what it means to be a teacher. But
Yeah,
we should ask the question, like, a teacher of what? Right. And if you don't have a deep knowledge of the thing that you're going to be teaching, like that might work for, I mean, I would say it only works for a little while, right? So
totally.
that's what it made me think of.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because this idea of the example you just gave, you have someone who is such a content expert, has more content knowledge than probably a lot of people
Yeah,
teaching
more
that
than he knows what to
content.
do with, frankly. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And, my first thought from that example goes to, like, imagine the passion he could be sharing
Mm,
with those students that would then spark them to pursue deeper knowledge, deeper content exploration, deeper content knowledge.
mm,
Having been a teacher, having spent a lot of time with students and in classrooms, I felt like one of my biggest responsibilities was to spark passion
mhm,
and to spark, engagement or enthusiasm within my students so that they could pursue this deep content knowledge to the extent of my ability and to the extent of their ability. And so, in moments like that or in situations like that, when you have someone who, in their own life, like your friend in Alabama, is pursuing this deep content knowledge because of the joy it brings them, that joy would be transferred to students
mm.
who participated or learned from him. And so, I think all of this to say, this idea of teaching students content and having a knowledge building curriculum is a potential springboard for so many moments of sparking enthusiasm, of sparking joy, of sparking opportunity because they'll be exposed to knowledge or content that, you know, thrills them. And so I don't know if that, well, I don't think it discredits what I was saying before. It just highlights this concept A and concept B that I was dueling with in my mind.
Yeah, yeah. I also had a thought, and I wonder if you have any takeaways kind of from the discussion on the other side of the house, kind of the pluralism side of the house. But
Mhm.
the how Ashley thinks about pluralism is pretty interesting. And I asked her a question about, all right, what about in these situations in like or countries like the Netherlands, Canada, where you have a pretty heterogeneous population. You have people born in the country, obviously a majority, but you've got many people coming from other countries and immigrating from other places around the world, um, and one of her responses was, yeah, and it's in those situations actually that pluralism works because we say, hey, there are some things that we're all going to learn, but we also have some things that maybe we would like to teach and practice uniquely. And I thought that was
Mhm.
pretty interesting. It reminded me a little bit of, in the American context of, um, now I'm going to really nerd out here, but of the Federalist Papers, the
Mm.
in Federalist 10, I think is where Madison talks about like the mischief of factions, and he says,
Mm.
"Well, how do you fight factions, a faction being like a small interest group, and what do you do when you've got a small interest group?" And he says, well, one thing to do is to have more, actually.
Mm.
And that's how you make sure that no one faction becomes the dominant, ideology and sort of subjugates everybody else. Is you just have an environment in which you can let lots of factions thrive, right? And
Yeah.
so what do? You don't mandate that everyone eats Italian food all the time. I personally would love that. So happens that there are a lot of people with gluten allergies, and that doesn't work. Or, you're one of them. Or people occasionally want a cheeseburger, and right.
Right.
And so, what do? We let lots of um, restaurants proliferate, and I think doing it in the school context is super interesting.
Yeah, so that point of hers, I could not be more team pluralism. And someone said to
Even
me
though
the
you're
other
not
day.
on team pasta.
Yeah, exactly. Well, gluten-free pasta.
Oh, there you go.
Even so someone said something to me the other day. Um, she said actually, she shared this, and it was her mom who shared it with her, and she said, "We need everybody, and we need all types of people." And my thinking from that back when I had that conversation was like she is so spot on, and it's actually a much bigger concept than what she even probably thought she was sharing at that time. Like we need everyone. We need the people we disagree with. We need the people we don't prefer. We need the people who challenge us. We need the people that cheer for us. We need everyone because they make all the others stronger in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And this idea of educational pluralism, having so many different types of schooling, of instruction, of curriculum, of theories, we need all of it because in the end, it's going to make every single thought we're developing, interaction we're having that much stronger.
Hmm.
And she made the greatest point, which is you don't have to actually be a beneficiary of all of them. You don't have to agree with all of them, but you have to have knowledge of them and of these different theories, of these different concepts. You have to have knowledge of the fact that there are different schooling opportunities that fit different personalities better, different students' needs better. Um, and then I think actually it was you that mentioned this scarcity mindset. Gone are those days where like only one person can have success or someone else's success means it's at the expense of your success. If
Right.
one school is doing really well because it's serving its population tremendously, what can you learn from them when you start your own school? What
Yeah.
can you learn from the curriculum that's resonating with a lot of students and that's speaking to the parents? What can you learn from the way they wrote it, from what it discusses, and then incorporate those successes within your own ethos, within your own way of doing something, within your own values.
Yeah.
I'm these days very much on the more the better, and maybe not always the merrier, but in the long run the merrier. The
Yeah.
more, you know, the more differentiation of thought and experience and perspective and opportunity that we can have in conversations, I think the better always.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it also, and this might be the something that I take away, and then I'd love to know if there's like one thing that you take from this conversation that we had with Ashley as well. But one of the things I think can really thrive in a more pluralist or kind of choice friendly environment is the sharing of great practices
Mm.
between educators and among schools. And yeah, when folks are in that scarcity mindset, as I kind of describe it, they can get really dug in. And and they get dug in, and so almost insulate themselves from other people's and other schools,
Yeah, completely.
methods, and that doesn't do justice to what students need, right? Like just
Mhm.
because a school, you know, whatever my if your kids go to a public school and there's a zone public school and there's a an Episcopal school down the street that's doing something that's working really well, like why would you not want to do that in your school? And
Totally.
I think pluralism can um, unearth some of those discoveries, and then we should be all about sharing those. And I think good educators, great educators, do want to share those things, and they want to learn as much as they can from other great educators. When we think about this stuff as like zero sum, that just doesn't create a positive environment for kids, unfortunately. So I do think that, so that's a way that I do think pluralism and quality are linked for sure. Because
Mhm.
if we can, let's make it routine to share practices, um, and implement them in whatever school we favor for our own children. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. I mean, we have these conversations all the time on the meetups where we have everybody coming
Mhm,
together from all different schools, from
mhm.
outside of schools, sharing, what their most innovative practice is, and then every single time in a conversation of 12 people, 11 of them, I would say 12, but we'll just, hedge the odds, 11 of them at a minimum are leaving with a new innovative practice that they can start implementing in their own world, and the reason that comes about and the reason all of their, independent lives are enriched because of those conversations is because of the different experiences that they've had that they're then able to learn from and then share from. So I definitely look forward to taking away some of those things. The last thing that she mentioned that will absolutely be one of the top things I take away from the conversation was this
Mhm.
idea of under challenging um,
Oh yeah, yeah,
students and under challenging having low expectations, having low quality expectations for people is only going to translate to under challenging them. And so um, to heighten our expectations of kids and then provide the support for them to actually meet those and then
yeah,
exceed those expectations has to be where we're headed, and not making excuses on the student's behalf as to why they can't reach them, but instead making the decision to implement practices or policies or strategies to help them reach those expectations, in my mind, is going to be made possible through educational pluralism and through
yeah.
opportunities for choice.
Yeah, I've got a friend who talks about this as with kind of a baseball analogy, um, saying like, listen, too often we are really proud when kids are like making contact with the ball, but if it's only slow pitch, it's not really that impressive, right?
Right.
And so she talks about a wanting to make sure that the pitches are over the plate. That's kind of the um, uh, appropriateness and like content piece. But she said, but also like, yeah, throw harder.
Mhm.
We gotta see what they can do, and kids will rise to the occasion, I believe.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I like that. Conversely, uh, kids will also play down to competition, right?
Oops,
And they
absolutely.
will meet our expectations. I think is kind of what I hear you saying, right? They'll meet our expectations, whether those are high expectations, low expectations. They will meet them.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's a really solid takeaway. Yeah,
Yeah.
uh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I'd be curious for people listening to this conversation, how have they found ways to create high expectations, high quality expectations for their students, and then developed practices to support them? I'd be curious how that looks.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, let's close it there. We'll invite people to share their thoughts with us. But thanks, Caitlin. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Shaka.